There's a lot of updates in Battle Cats that really shifts the game balance in a major way. There's the introduction of the Wave Blocker ability that nullifies wave attacks and makes majority of wave stages a joke. There's Kasli, which shifts the uber balance meta. There's the update that introduces Courier Cat, which destroys the balancing of red enemies. All of these shifts Battle Cats in a very major way, but there is one update at the time that not really feel like that big of a deal, but surely and slowly, the update influences basically every single newer unit in the game and ushers in a new era for Battle Cats. And that is update version 4.6, almost a decade ago in 2016. Version 4.6 does not really introduce like that much new units and enemies. Majority of the update actually revolves around castles and dragon collapse. You don't even get to see these in EN. But this is also where Almighty's first debut, with their 3 Ubers in the set, Zeus, Anubis, and Aphrodite. The Almighties is now a very well-known set with, you know, a set with one of the best generalist value. But we're not here to talk about Almighties. There's just one specific unit that I want to focus on, and that is Aphrodite. Because Aphrodite is amongst one of the 2 first units that has the ability of Long Distance, together with Prisoner Cat. Long Distance is an ability or a trait that the unit can have where it would affect the unit's way of attacking the enemy and how it would perceive range. I've talked much deeper into how Long Distance and Omni Strike works in another old video. You can watch that for a deeper analysis, but I'll still briefly talk about it here. Basically, in Battle Cats, the way that range works for normal units is that a unit will always move forward until it detects an enemy that is within their standing range, and then they'll begin their attack. If they are an area attacker, then anything that is between themselves and their standing range will be damaged. And if they're single target, then any enemies that are closest to them that is within their range will be damaged. That is how it works for every single unit in the game. But Long Distance is different. Usually for normal units, the detection range and the hitbox range is always the same. For example, Paris Cat with 350 standing range will always hit anything that is 350 range away from them. But Long Distance can have a different hitbox that are completely separate from their detection range. This can cause a lot of units to be able to hit further than their standing range and even miss enemies that are closer to them. There are certain Long Distance units without any blind spot, and these units are classified as Omni Strike. But Long Distance and Omni Strike are essentially one and the same. They kind of just have like slightly different numbers. So for the sake of simplicity, for the rest of the video, when I talk about LD and LD's peers, I'm generally also talking about Omni Strike. That is the gist of it, though. Again, I do have a video on it if you really want to go a little bit deeper on the mechanics of LD and Omni Strike. Now, back to Aphrodite. Aphrodite is one of those units that have Long Distance. Her standing range is 600, while her hitbox is between 450 and 850. So she will stop moving as long as there's an enemy 600 range away from her, but her attacks will deal damage to enemies that are between 450 and 850 range away from her. You'll have to protect her blind spot with other units, but luckily majority of non-uber damagers are exactly up to that task. Aphrodite's job is to hit basically everything else that is significantly harder for your other units to actually hit. Aphrodite is a very good unit, but there's a bit of a problem when using Aphrodite as like an example of LD being good. The thing is, Aphrodite's not just good because she's LD, it's because her stats in general is just really good at the first place. Like, even if she doesn't have LD, she would still be a pretty solid unit without the piercing whatsoever. She got really good standing range and a pretty decent damage, so it's hard to say how good exactly is LD as an ability, given that Afro's already good with like stats anyway, so... But what about an LD unit that's just outright terrible in stats? Well, let's talk about Riding Mina. Riding Mina is a special cat that is introduced in 5.0 that you can obtain by beating her station Stories of Legend, Learn to Love. Mina's stats, to put it simply, is really freaking bad. Her range is 400, which is rather unsafe for a special legend. Her DPS is like 1.5k, which is absurdly low, and her health is basically non-existent. She quite literally have like half of the stats of Aphrodite. Yeah, it's an Uber versus a free unit, but even by no Uber standards, this stats is really bad. The only thing that is kind of good from her is that her cost and recharge time is a bit better compared to like other special legends. But even then, comparing her to other special legends like Ururun or Liliandum, Mina's stats is still really bad. Ururun has significantly way higher damage compared to Mina, and even has a better standing range. While Liliandum, well okay, Liliandum still sucks, but at least his range is really high, and he have a chance to slow any enemies while also like chill at a pretty safe range. Mina doesn't even even have any abilities in her non-true form. In fact, Mina's stats was so bad that this is one of the few units that had their stats directly buffed. Not like by true form or talents or anything, her stats was just straight up buffed. In update 6.7, her range goes from 400 to 435. That's a pretty good buff, but her damage and health stays the same. And yet, even before this buff, Mina had a couple of usages here and there. Well, she had more usages when she's buffed, but even before that, she still had some usages. Why? Because she has LD. Yeah, her stats sucks, but her piercing range allows her to be able to snipe down backliner enemies really easily. Like, yeah, sure, technically you don't have to use LD units to snipe down backliners. You can just use units with high range to outrange them, or use like waivers to chip them off. But when it comes to waivers, we only had like Crazy Growth as our proper waiver for like the longest time ever. Crazy Growth does this job pretty decently well, but it doesn't hurt to have another mechanic to help chip down backliner enemies. Plus, non-LD units can have a bit of a trouble when hitting backliners or high range enemies if you want to just outrange them normally. You have to put your units in a position where they're able to get a clear shot, because normally on non-LD units, if there's other enemies in front of the backliner enemies, then you would have to go through all of the frontline enemies first to be able to get a clear shot and actually reach the backline enemy. Or have the backline enemy push towards you so that they are in a position where your cats can attack them. But LD units doesn't really have this issue because the piercing range allows your units to be way more lenient when it comes to positioning on hitting the backliner enemies. You don't need to be as specific when it comes to positioning, and you don't need like any sort of setup to be able to hit backliner enemies. It just makes hitting backliner enemies way easier. Not only that, LD cats is also what I would say accurate. Like I said before, on non-LD cats, you would usually need to get like a clear shot onto the enemies to actually be able to damage them. That's not just only a problem for backliner enemies. This is just a problem for majority of non-melee enemies in general, stuff like Rain D or Bear variants. This is also much bigger problems when they have multiple knockbacks, because if you just keep on knocking them back, they will just often sit in a safer position where they would be safe from your unit's attack, and then you either have to push through all whatever's in front of them, or you have to let them go forward first before you can damage them again. This can be really troublesome and can make you lose a lot of potential damage. But with LD units, you can almost never have to worry about this, because chances are, even if you knock these enemies back, they're probably going to still land on your piercing range one way or another. You're basically almost never gonna miss your attacks on mid-range enemies, even if the enemies keeps on like repositioning themselves. They're still gonna get hit all the time. For the case of Riding Mina though, she was not really used like a generalist like this, because yeah, her damage is very low, but she's still usable to like snipe down high range enemies that no other cats can hit. But in her true form, she actually gets her damage doubled, so her damage actually matters now. And she got like health increase and piercing range too. Now her piercing range is up to 700 instead of 600. But at this point, Mina is not the only one that got a true form. Her peer, Ururun, also got a true form where her damage is now buffed to 6000 DPS, while Mina, even though it's doubled, is still only 3000, which is half of Ururun's. And yet, at this point, with this true form that Mina got, she actually got about as much usage as Ururun. Hell, sometimes I would even argue that she kinda have more usages than Ururun. The fact that she's not only able to snipe down high-range backliner enemies in the field, but also basically hitting everything with high accuracy, that's already enough to give her a significant advantage over Ururun, who have double her damage. Cause not only that Mina can reach far, but her damage is also very accurate and is always constantly applied to basically every enemies across the board. Now, the important phrase here is basically hitting every enemies across the board. This is important, cause when it comes to the introduction of LD, it's not just like, oh, now the units are able to reach farther and your units are now more accurate. I mean, yeah, it's like a big part of the point, but I would say the real main point on why LD is such an insane game changer is a slightly different thing. It's not so much in like a technical standpoint, but more so in a mindset standpoint. I know, that sounds weird, but like, listen, what makes LD such a game changer isn't just how good they are, but also just the fact that LD unit ranges are always so big that you never actually have to look up what their stats are in the first place. Majority of LD Ubers and Legends hits like basically everything in the stage. You can easily tell that the only things most LD units don't outrange are like very specific super high backliners. Aside from those, you can assume that your LD units hits basically everything, so you never have to look look up what their range numbers are. Removing the need to look up range numbers from battle cats, that is, I would say, the true reason on why LD is such a game changer. Like, I have a lot of range numbers memorized, and I can tell you like which units outrange what enemies and what enemies outrange which units. Like, Bun-Buns are outranged by Cameraman, which is outranged by Aurost, which is outranged by Paris, which is outranged by Bear, which is outranged by Dragon, which is outranged by Laboyne, which is outranged by Ururun, which is outranged by Slot, which is outranged by Little Nyandem, which is not actually outranged by Camel, because Little Nyandem actually outranges Camel by 1, but technically Little Nyandem can get hit by Camel if he speeds clip. I remember all of these numbers and specific range interactions because you absolutely need to remember these when it comes to creating lineups in Battle Cats before LD exist. Most units are only able to counter very specific things, because if you're not able to outrange certain enemies, then you might as well just not be able to do anything sometimes. But that's not quite the case for like majority of LD units, especially Ubers nowadays. You can safely assume your LD units would be able to hit basically everything in the stage and you would be correct. And unlike waves, LD units are so much more common now. It's almost rare for a new Uber or special legend to not have a piercing range or some sort nowadays. If your unit's just like a basic range generalist without any piercing whatsoever, chances are it's probably not that good. But piercing range nowadays just makes you able to hit basically everything without even needing to know specific interactions or specific range numbers. Even on non-special units, most of the LD units can still hit basically almost every non-backliners in the game. Except for ones with like kind of a short range like Courier, but like some of the range stackable units that are LD like Volter or Nymphcat, even though they don't have like as high of a standing range than like Ubers or special legends, they still have such a high piercing range that they are basically guaranteed to hit basically like everything in the stage except for like high backliners. You don't need to know that like Volter actually gets outranged by Bear or something like that, because Volter can still hit bears pretty consistently too. I mean, she needs stepping stone, yeah, but like you probably have a stepping stone somewhere in the stage. You don't need to know those numbers. But yeah, essentially I would say this is the absolute biggest game changer when it comes to the introduction of LD. Aside from just being powerful, LD units are just really easy to use, and that ease of use is what makes LD like such a game changer. Strategizing becomes significantly simpler when you don't ever have to look up specific number stats. Like, just think back about like your favorite LD Ubers. Like, do you know anything about their range stats? Probably not. Does it hit basically everything on the field? Probably yes. I mean, even like for non-LD units, you don't really need to know every stats, I guess. There are like, you know, specific archetype that you might not need like a specific range on. You obviously would know like Cosmo that hits super far, hits also basically everything. Or Rushers, for example, also don't require specific number knowledge. But LD units makes it especially easy for your units to be used in basically every generalist situations. It just makes the game really simple, and that's mostly a good thing. Oh, also, I'm not saying that LD update suddenly turns the game instantly easier or something, by the way. The first couple of LD enemies that were introduced, like Mina or Clyonel, was some of the most technical Battle Cats has ever been, with some of the discussions and strategizing going on pretty much all over the community. But that's probably a topic for another time. I'm mainly focusing how this changes the general cat unit meta. The introduction of the LD unit itself doesn't immediately like flip everything over. It doesn't immediately make the game simpler. But the fact is, LD nowadays is like in every new unit and is super normalized nowadays, is what I'm trying to focus more here. And it's not just limited to just LD, this also includes basically any of the range extension ability, especially with Surge and Explosion too, which is kind of funny because despite waves being significantly older than Surge, we actually have almost the same amount of like Surge Ubers compared to Wave Ubers. Waves are just really that rare. But yeah, anyways, LD isn't the only culprit here, and range extension ability is also not the only culprit on like making the game simpler. The increasing amount of Rusher type archetype units are also partly to blame, but again, probably a topic for another time. I didn't want to spread my focus too much for this video. The basic point is, LD units being super common is a big factor to lineup building becoming simplified a lot. You no longer really need to like nerd out about every specific range numbers or whatnot to counter most stages, and you can just have like a singular powerful LD units that you can just bring for majority of the game, and they would have no issue working on majority of the game. I mean, I can't lie, being nerdy about like specific numbers and figuring out insane strats from like very specific number interactions and stuff, and those are kind of what got me into Battle Cats really deeply. Just like seeing the crazy parts of the community that are like theory crafting and doing insane what ifs just by like looking at numbers. Those were fun. So I can't say I didn't miss that part of Battle Cats, but to be honest, this is probably for the better. Not just because it makes the game casual friendly for like the, you know, more normal people, but also because I'm a grown man now. I don't really have that much time to like dedicate on like analyzing every single enemy and every single new units and like every single stages anymore and all that stuff. I mean, I still do that sometimes, but the introduction of piercing range makes this job way less challenging. It's so much easier to tell if a unit is top tier or not nowadays. If they're either a rusher or a LD unit, chances are they're probably better than those that aren't. I mean, there's a reason why Courier's top tier is because he's a rusher and an LD unit. And also there's still a reason on why Aphrodite, even on release, was considered to be basically like a top 3 Uber, and like even right now, years and years later, she's still like a really good Uber. I mean, okay, mainly because she's not really like balanced well at all. She's really freaking strong for some reason. And the crazy thing is, her damage numbers is actually really low. She only have like 3000 DPS at level 30. That's pretty low, but like, yeah, sure, she has good range, but that LD piercing at what makes her such an easy top tier unit. And you don't even have to look up what range Afro has, because her standing and piercing range allows her to hit basically every enemies in the game. There's a reason on why a lot of top tier units have some sort of piercing, whether it's by Surge or LD. It's just because they're not just powerful, it's also just the fact that they're very easy to use. Big damage numbers is one thing, but ease of use really like matters when it comes to like being a top tier Uber. I mean, there's a really good reason on like why Kasli is top tier. She got LD and really high damage number. She's very easy to use and deals a bunch of damage. Like, yeah, sure, Last Boss does a lot of damage, but Last Boss is really hard to use. Kasli not only does a lot of damage, she's also very easy to use. You never even have to look up what her stats are to know that she's good. She hits basically everything in the stage and kills basically everything in the stage. If you want to learn more about her and why she's ridiculously powerful, then I have a very long video talking about Kasli and why it's such an absurd unit. Go watch that if you're interested. But yeah, that's why LD is such an insane game changer. It marks like the era of Battle Cats going from, I would say, like a nerdy game to a much more casual friendly game. So hey, if you love your LD units, you can thank Aphrodite and Prisoner Cat for existing. They paved the way for your future LD units to exist. What is your favorite LD unit anyways? Tell me in the comment. And if you have any more thoughts or questions, then also leave it in the comment. I have a lot more videos talking about Battle Cats analysis. I'm a very nerdy guy. Go watch my videos if you're interested and stick around and subscribe and stuff. But yeah, that's it. Catch you another time. See ya.